Robots in disguise. The Transformers.
Remember waking up on Saturday morning in 1984, pouring yourself a bowl of Fruity Pebbles, and watching robots that could turn into cars beat the absolute hell out of each other. Yeah, me too. But here's the thing. Have you ever wondered how a bunch of Japanese robot toys became one of the most iconic franchises in American pop culture history? Well, in this video, I'm going to reveal the wild, behind-the-scenes story of how Transformers went from a desperate marketing experiment to a cultural juggernaut that's still printing money 40 years later. We're talking about the original 1980s cartoon that defined a generation, the one that made you beg your parents for an Optimus Prime for Christmas.
Transformers. Robots in disguise.
And here's what most people don't know. This entire phenomenon was basically held together with duct tape and corporate desperation. The story involves toy companies on the brink of bankruptcy, animation studios cutting every corner imaginable, and a cartoon that was literally designed to be a 22-minute commercial. But somehow, against all odds, it became something way more than that. I'm going to walk you through the most fascinating facts about the original Transformers cartoon. The stuff that'll make you see those old episodes in a completely different light. We're talking about voice acting secrets, animation disasters that became iconic, and the movie that traumatized an entire generation of kids.
My name is Optimus Prime, from the planet Cybertron.
The real story behind Transformers is even more fascinating than the show itself. So buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride through nostalgia, corporate greed, and accidental genius. The desperate origins. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Transformers almost never happened. And when I say almost, I mean we came this close to living in a world without Optimus Prime. See, back in the early 1980s, Hasbro was in serious trouble. G.I. Joe was doing okay, but they needed something bigger. Something that could compete with what was happening over in Japan, where robot toys were absolutely dominating. Japanese kids were going crazy for these transforming robot toys, and Hasbro was watching all that money flow overseas. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Hasbro didn't actually invent Transformers. Not even close. They basically went to Japan on a shopping trip and said, "Hey, can we buy your robot toys and rebrand them for America?" And that's exactly what they did. The toys came from two different Japanese toy lines, Diaclone and Microchange, both made by a company called Takara. These weren't even originally meant to be the same toy line. Diaclone had these robot figures that came with little pilot figures, and the whole concept was that the robots were actually mecha suits being piloted by tiny humans. Microchange had robots that transformed into everyday objects like cassette tapes, guns, and even microscopes. Hasbro looked at all of this and thought, you know what? Let's mash these together and call them Transformers. They literally took toys from two completely different product lines, removed the human pilot figures, and said these are all the same species of alien robots. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a toy line. But here's the genius part, and this is where American marketing really kicked in. They needed a story. Japanese toys didn't really need elaborate backstories back then. But American kids, we needed lore. We needed good guys and bad guys. We needed a reason why these robots were fighting. So Hasbro partnered with Marvel Comics. Yeah, that Marvel. And Marvel created the entire mythology. Autobots versus Decepticons, Cybertron, Energon cubes, the whole 9 yards. Jim Shooter and Dennis O'Neil basically invented the Transformers universe as we know it in a matter of weeks. They created this whole backstory about a war that had been raging for millions of years, about robots that could think and feel, about a dying planet and the desperate search for energy. And the crazy thing, they made it work. They took a bunch of unrelated Japanese toys and created a mythology that felt real, that felt important. The cartoon that was never meant to be good. Alright, here's something that's going to change how you think about those Saturday mornings. The Transformers cartoon was never supposed to be quality television. It was supposed to be cheap, fast, and effective at selling toys. That's it. Let me explain. In 1984, the FCC deregulated children's television. Before that, there were strict rules about how much advertising you could show to kids. But after deregulation, all bets were off. Suddenly, toy companies realized they could make entire TV shows that were basically 22-minute toy commercials, and it was completely legal. Hasbro looked at this opportunity and said, "We need a cartoon, and we need it fast." So they went to Sunbow Productions and Marvel Productions, the same folks who were doing G.I. Joe, and basically said, "Make us a show that sells toys." The budget was tight. I'm talking really tight. They outsourced most of the animation to studios in Japan and South Korea to save money. And if you go back and watch those episodes now, you can see it. The animation errors are legendary. Characters changing colors mid-scene. Robots that are supposed to be dead showing up in the background. Starscream's voice coming out of Thundercracker's mouth. But here's the thing, and this is what makes the story so fascinating. Despite all of these limitations, despite the fact that this was literally designed to sell toys, the writers actually tried to make it good. They didn't have to. They could have just made 65 episodes of robots punching each other with no plot or character development. The show had real stakes. Characters died. Not just died, they got blown to pieces on screen. This was a kids' show where the good guys didn't always win, where war had consequences, where your favorite character could get killed off because Hasbro wanted to sell a new toy. There were episodes where the Autobots failed, where innocent people got hurt, where the Decepticons actually won, and the Autobots had to retreat. That kind of storytelling was rare in children's television at the time. Most cartoons were just good guys win, bad guys lose, reset button for next week. But Transformers had continuity, had consequences, had real emotional weight. The voice acting that defined a generation. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get enough credit. The voice acting in Transformers was absolutely phenomenal. And I mean that. This wasn't just competent voice work. This was career-defining, generation-shaping performance art. Think about it. These voice actors had to make you care about robots. Not humans, not animals. Robots. Chunks of metal that transformed into vehicles. And somehow, they pulled it off so well that 40 years later, we can still hear Peter Cullen's voice saying,
"Autobots, transform and roll! Transform and roll out!"
Peter Cullen, who voiced Optimus Prime, has this amazing story about how he got the voice. His brother Larry Cullen was a Marine Corps captain who served in Vietnam. When Peter was trying to figure out how to voice this leader character, he asked his brother for advice. Larry told him, "Don't be a Hollywood hero, be a real hero. Real heroes don't yell and scream. They're confident and calm." So Cullen gave Optimus this deep, authoritative, but gentle voice that made him feel like the dad we all wished we had. Optimus never yelled unless he absolutely had to. He was patient, wise, and compassionate. When he gave orders, you wanted to follow them. That voice made Optimus Prime into more than just a toy. It made him into a role model. And then there's Frank Welker as Megatron. Welker's a legend in voice acting. He's done everything from Fred and Scooby-Doo to basically every animal sound you've ever heard in a movie. But his Megatron was something special.
I want you working, not nagging at each other like hyper-driven chatteroids!
That menacing, theatrical voice that was somehow both terrifying and charismatic at the same time. Chris Latta voiced both Starscream and Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe, and he gave Starscream this whiny, backstabbing personality that made him one of the most memorable characters in the show. Every time Starscream tried to overthrow Megatron and failed, it was comedy gold. Latta gave him this high-pitched, nasally voice that made him sound perpetually frustrated, and it was perfect.
Megatron has fallen!
These voice actors were working in a recording studio, often alone, reading lines without seeing the animation. They had to create chemistry with other actors they weren't even in the room with. And they still managed to create characters that felt real, that had relationships and rivalries and personalities. That's actual talent. The movie that traumatized a generation. Okay, we need to talk about 1986. We need to talk about Transformers, the movie. Because if you were a kid in the 80s, this movie probably gave you your first real experience with grief and loss. Hasbro decided they wanted to make a theatrical movie. Their thinking was simple and brutally corporate. Kill off all the old characters so we can introduce new toys for the 1986 product line. From a business perspective, it made perfect sense. From a not traumatizing children perspective, it was a disaster. The movie opens with Unicron, this planet-sized Transformer voiced by Orson Welles, in literally his last performance before he died. Unicron just shows up and eats an entire planet. Already, we're off to a dark start. But then, about 20 minutes in, the Decepticons attack Autobot City, and they just start murdering everyone. Prowl? Dead. Brawn? Dead. Ratchet? Dead. Ironhide, the lovable weapons specialist who'd been in the show since day one, shot point blank by Megatron and left to die on screen. These weren't gentle deaths either. These were brutal, on-screen executions. And then, they killed Optimus Prime. Let me tell you something. When Optimus Prime died in that movie theater, kids were crying. Not just sniffling, full-on sobbing. I was there. I saw it. Hell, I was crying too. Parents were furious. Hasbro's customer service line was flooded with angry calls. Parents demanding to know why they killed Optimus Prime. Kids calling in tears asking if he was really dead. The backlash was so severe that Hasbro had to change their plans for the G.I. Joe movie. They were going to kill Duke, but after the Optimus Prime disaster, they changed it so Duke just goes into a coma instead. The movie was supposed to be this big, epic passing of the torch to a new generation. Hot Rod becomes Rodimus Prime, and we get all these new characters like Ultra Magnus and RC. But kids didn't want new characters. They wanted Optimus Prime back. The movie bombed at the box office. It made about $5.8 million against a $6 million budget. But here's the twist. It became a cult classic. The soundtrack, featuring songs by Stan Bush like The Touch and Dare, became iconic. The animation quality was way better than the TV show. And that dark, serious tone, it made the movie feel important. The animation shortcuts that became iconic. Let's talk about something fun. All the ways the animation team cut corners, and how some of those shortcuts accidentally became part of the charm. The transformation sequences, you know, the actual transforming part of Transformers, were expensive to animate. So the animators came up with a brilliant solution. They created stock footage, transformation sequences, that they could reuse over and over again. Every time Optimus Prime transformed, it was the same animation. Every single time. And you know what? We loved it. Those transformation sequences became iconic. We'd watch them and go, oh man, here comes Optimus. It was like a signature move in a fighting game. What started as a cost-cutting measure became one of the most memorable parts of the show. The animators also loved to reuse background characters. If you watch carefully, you'll see the same generic Transformers showing up in crowd scenes, regardless of whether it makes sense for them to be there. There's this famous scene where Starscream gets crowned leader of the Decepticons, and if you look in the background, there are like 5 Starscreams watching. Just multiple copies of the same character. The color errors were legendary too. Transformers would change color mid-scene. Optimus Prime would suddenly have Ironhide's colors. Megatron would turn purple for no reason. It was chaos. But here's the thing. As kids, we didn't care. Or maybe we did notice. But it didn't matter, because the stories were engaging enough that we overlooked the technical problems. The show had heart, and that's what kept us coming back. The cultural impact, nobody saw coming. Here's what Hasbro didn't expect. Transformers became more than just a toy commercial. It became a genuine cultural phenomenon. The show dealt with real themes: war, sacrifice, loyalty, betrayal. These weren't just robots fighting. These were characters with personalities, relationships, and moral dilemmas. Optimus Prime wasn't just a good guy. He was a leader struggling with the weight of command, making impossible choices to protect his people. The Autobots versus Decepticons conflict was basically a Cold War allegory that kids could understand. The Autobots were the good guys fighting for freedom and peace. The Decepticons wanted power and control. It was simple, but it worked. And the show didn't talk down to kids. Characters died. The good guys lost battles. There were episodes where the Autobots failed to stop the Decepticons' plan. That kind of storytelling was rare in children's television at the time. The toys themselves became more than just toys. They were collectibles. Kids would trade them, customize them, create their own stories with them. The transformation gimmick was genuinely innovative. These weren't just action figures. They were puzzles that you could solve over and over again. And the franchise just kept growing. After the original series ended, we got Generation 2, Beast Wars, Armada, and eventually the Michael Bay movies that introduced Transformers to a whole new generation. Love them or hate them, those movies made billions of dollars and proved that the franchise still had massive appeal. The legacy that keeps on giving. Fast forward to today, and Transformers is still everywhere. The franchise has made over $10 billion across toys, movies, TV shows, comics, and video games. That's billion with a B. But more than the money, Transformers left a mark on pop culture that's hard to overstate. How many other toy lines from the 80s are still relevant today? G.I. Joe has had some comebacks, but nothing like Transformers. He-Man gets a reboot every decade or so, but it never quite captures the magic. Transformers endures because it tapped into something fundamental. The idea that things can be more than they appear. A truck that's also a robot. A cassette player that's also a spy. It's transformation as metaphor. The idea that we all have hidden potential, that we can be more than what we seem. And let's be honest, it endures because those original episodes, flaws and all, were genuinely entertaining. They had action, humor, drama, and characters we cared about. They were made on a shoestring budget by people who were just trying to sell toys. But somewhere along the way, they created something that mattered to us. I still have my original Optimus Prime toy. The stickers are peeling off, one of the fists is missing, and the trailer doesn't stay attached anymore. But I can't bring myself to get rid of it. Because it's not just a toy, it's a piece of my childhood.
We need your Transformers collection.
Yeah, we need my Transformers.
A reminder of Saturday mornings when the biggest problem in my life was whether the Autobots would defeat the Decepticons this week. So that's the story of how Transformers went from a desperate marketing experiment to a cultural phenomenon that's still going strong 40 years later. It's a story of corporate cynicism, accidentally creating something genuine, of cost-cutting measures that became iconic, and of voice actors and writers who cared enough to make a toy commercial into something worth remembering. The next time you see a Transformers toy on a shelf or catch a rerun of the old cartoon, remember, you're looking at a piece of pop culture history that was never supposed to be this important, but it is, and that's pretty damn cool. Now, if you enjoyed this deep dive into 80s nostalgia, you're going to love my next video, where I break down the behind-the-scenes story of another iconic 80s franchise that defined our generation. Click that video right there, and I'll see you in the next one. And hey, if you've got your own Transformers memories, drop them in the comments. I want to hear about your favorite character, your first toy, or that time you cried when Optimus died. Were you a Soundwave kid or a Starscream kid? Drop a comment, and let's relive the glory days together.